Wisdom, that's the test. Which rival wisdom team is best? 52 teams of 8 antique rival wisdoms that have passed the test of time to encourage, educate, and entertain generations for centuries. Team 21. Start virtuously. Quote definitions, biographical context and synergy analysis to replace hate with motivational education to guidealife.com. Quote 21.1. I got my start by giving myself a start. Sarah Breedlove, Madam C.J. Walker, 1867 to 1919. Quote definition. No external authority, institution, or favorable circumstance gave the first push. It was entirely self-initiated. The start that changes a life is almost always the one the person gives themselves, because the world rarely volunteers it unprompted. Self-initiation is not arrogance. It is the refusal to wait for permission that may never come. Quote application. This principle is the ignition switch for the entire replacehate.org mission, and for everyone it reaches. Waiting for society to become kinder, for institutions to become wiser, for circumstances to improve, is waiting for the start that no one else is going to provide. The mission gives itself a start, and it invites everyone it reaches to do the same. Sarah Breedlove, Madam C.J. Walker, appears in teams 9, 10, and 18 as well, each time illuminating a different dimension of her extraordinary life. Here her most foundational principle takes center stage, the act of self-initiation that made everything else possible. Born in 1867 to formerly enslaved parents on a Louisiana cotton plantation, orphaned at 7, married at 14, widowed at 20 with an infant daughter, working as a washerwoman for nearly 2 decades, Breedlove had accumulated by her late 30s exactly 0 of the conditions that the world associates with entrepreneurial success. No capital, no connections, no formal education, no examples of women like her succeeding in business because there weren't any. She gave herself a start anyway, developed a hair care formula, began selling door-to-door, trained sales agents, built a manufacturing operation, and died in 1919 as the first self-made female millionaire in American history. The start she gave herself compounded into an empire because she gave it, because no one else was going to. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Stop waiting for external permission, institutional support, or favorable circumstances to provide the start that self-initiation can provide right now. 2. Recognize that the absence of obvious opportunity is not evidence that opportunity doesn't exist. It is evidence that it must be created rather than found. 3. Apply the give yourself a start principle to every domain where waiting has substituted for beginning. The conversation not started, the project not launched, the change not initiated.
Quote 21.2. A single lie destroys a whole reputation of integrity. Baltasar Gracián, 1601 to 1658. Quote definition. Integrity, the reputation for consistent honesty and trustworthiness built across years of reliable conduct, is destroyed disproportionately by a single discovered lie. The asymmetry is severe. Integrity is built slowly, incrementally, through sustained honest action, and can be eliminated by one act of dishonesty that retroactively calls all previous trustworthy behavior into question. Quote application. For a mission grounded in truth and wisdom, this principle is the standing reminder that credibility is the mission's most valuable and most fragile asset. Every exaggerated claim, every selective presentation of evidence, every convenience-driven departure from accuracy is a potential single lie that retroactively undermines everything built before it. The mission maintains integrity not because it is required, but because it is the only foundation that holds. Baltasar Gracián appears in teams 12 and 16 as well, where his principles of strategic opportunity-making and immediate wise action anchored those frameworks. Here his most sobering observation about reputation takes the stage. Born in 1601 in Belmonte de Calatayud, Aragon, Spain, Gracián entered the Jesuit order and spent his career as a preacher and writer whose practical moral philosophy, particularly the art of worldly wisdom, was drawn from close observation of how reputation was built and destroyed in the courts, institutions, and social environments he inhabited. He had watched people of genuine ability lose everything through a single revealed dishonesty that caused observers to reinterpret every previous action through the new lens of suspected duplicity. The asymmetry was not a rhetorical point for him, but an empirical observation. Integrity is the slowest asset to build and the fastest to lose, and the destruction is retroactive. The lie doesn't just end the reputation, it revises it. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Treat every temptation toward dishonesty, however small, however convenient, as a potential destroyer of everything that honest conduct has built. 2. Understand the asymmetry honestly. Integrity requires years to establish and can be eliminated by minutes of dishonesty, which means the standard for honesty must be unconditional rather than situational. 3. Apply this principle to the mission itself. The credibility of every wise claim made here rests on the accumulated trust that only consistent accuracy can build and only one discovered lie can destroy.
Quote 21.3. Men are only as great as they are kind. Elbert Hubbard, 1856 to 1915. Quote definition. Genuine greatness, the kind that actually deserves the name, is inseparable from kindness. Intelligence, achievement, power, and fame without kindness are not components of greatness, but its absence wearing impressive clothes. The measure of how great a person actually is runs precisely as far as their kindness extends, and no further. Quote application. This is the most direct possible statement of the ReplaceHate.org thesis. Kindness is not a soft supplement to more serious virtues, but the measure of the serious virtues themselves. The wisest, most accomplished, most influential person who is unkind has not achieved greatness. They have achieved its impressive-looking substitute. The mission makes this case every day. Wisdom without kindness is incomplete, and kindness is the test that reveals whether the wisdom is genuine. Elbert Hubbard appears in Team 19 as well, where his principle about using head and hands anchored the action layer. Born in 1856 in Bloomington, Illinois, Hubbard built the Roycroft Arts and Crafts community in East Aurora, New York, and wrote the enormously distributed A Message to Garcia, among dozens of other works. He was a practical philosopher who consistently argued that character, particularly kindness and genuine service, was the foundation of all genuine achievement, not a decoration added after the real work was done. His observation that men are only as great as they are kind was not a sentimental platitude, but a considered judgment about what greatness actually consisted of, drawn from watching capable, ambitious people build impressive careers while remaining genuinely unkind and observing that the impressiveness ultimately rang hollow. He and his wife Alice died aboard the Lusitania in 1915. Accounts suggest he was last seen calmly comforting other passengers rather than seeking a lifeboat. He was as great as he was kind, and by the accounts of those present, he was very great indeed. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Apply the kindness test to assessments of greatness, in historical figures, in contemporary leaders, and in oneself, as the most honest available measure of genuine achievement. 2. Resist the separation of kindness from other virtues as though it were optional or supplementary. It is the standard by which all other virtues are measured. 3. Invest in kindness as the core of the development of genuine character rather than as the finishing touch applied after the more serious work is complete.
Quote 21.4. Charity begins at home, and justice begins next door. Charles Dickens, 1812 to 1870. Quote definition. Genuine care starts with those immediately around us. Home is the right starting point for learning to love and serve. But it cannot stop there. Justice, the active recognition and response to wrongs done to others, begins right at the edge of the personal circle, with a neighbor next door. The two principles together describe the complete expansion of moral concern outward from the self. Quote application. This is Dickens's corrective to the comfortable containment of charity within the personal. Where Horace Smith observed that charity mostly ends where it begins, Dickens insists that justice, the harder, more demanding form of care, must extend immediately to the neighbor, the person just outside the circle of the personally known and personally comfortable. The mission of making America wiser and kinder begins at home and extends to every neighbor within reach. Charles Dickens appears in teams 8, 12, 13, and 18 across these 52 teams. The consistency of his moral vision and the range of his observations make him one of the collection's most versatile voices. Born in 1812 in Portsmouth, England, and shaped permanently by his childhood experience of poverty and child labor, Dickens spent his career making the invisible visible. the people next door to middle class. Comfort, whose suffering was technically known and practically ignored. His novels, Oliver Twist, Bleak House, Little Dorrit, Our Mutual Friend, are sustained arguments that justice must begin next door, that the suffering of people just outside the personally comfortable circle is a moral claim that cannot be legitimately declined by citing the distance. He lived this principle as well as wrote it. His charitable activities, his journalism on social conditions, and his public readings that generated immediate giving were all applications of the justice begins next door standard to his own considerable means and influence. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Use the home as a genuine starting point for the expansion of moral concern rather than its permanent resting place. 2. Recognize justice as the next step from charity, not merely giving to those we choose but actively addressing the wrongs done to those just outside our comfortable circle. 3. Apply the next door principle concretely. Who is just outside your personal circle of comfort and concern, and what does justice toward them actually require?
Quote 21.5, Liberty without virtue would be no blessing to us. Benjamin Rush, 1745 to 1813. Quote definition. Freedom without the moral character to use it well is not a gift but a danger, to the person who possesses it and to everyone around them. Liberty is the condition in which virtue can flourish and produce genuine good. Without virtue, the same liberty produces license, which is destructive rather than liberating. The blessing of freedom depends entirely on the character of those who exercise it. Quote application. This principle connects directly to the mission's deepest rationale. A freer America that is not a wiser and kinder America is not necessarily a better one. The work of education in virtue and wisdom is not the constraint on freedom but its prerequisite, because freedom exercised without wisdom produces the hatred, division, and cruelty that the mission exists to replace. Liberty and virtue are not competing values but necessary partners. Benjamin Rush was born in 1745 near Philadelphia, studied medicine at the College of New Jersey, Princeton, and the University of Edinburgh, and became the most prominent physician in America during the Revolutionary era, signing the Declaration of Independence, serving as Surgeon General of the Continental Army, and founding the first free medical clinic in America. He was also an early advocate for public education, the abolition of slavery, the humane treatment of the mentally ill, and the reform of criminal punishment, a range of reforms grounded in his consistent conviction that genuine freedom required the development of genuine moral character in the citizens who exercised it. He understood from his medical practice that the capacity for good and evil alike was shaped by education, environment, and habit, and that a republic of free people required the active cultivation of the virtues that made freedom a blessing rather than a curse. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Understand liberty and virtue as inseparable partners rather than competing values. Freedom without character produces license, not blessing. 2. Invest in the development of virtue, in oneself and in communities, as the work that makes freedom worth having rather than merely possessing. 3. Apply this principle to the mission directly. Making America wiser and kinder is not a constraint on American freedom but the work that makes American freedom genuinely good.
Quote 21.6. All of our reasoning ends in surrender to feeling. Blaise Pascal, 1623 to 1662. Quote definition. However elaborate, however rigorous, however well-constructed our chains of reasoning, they ultimately serve conclusions that feeling has already chosen. Reason is the instrument that justifies what emotion has already decided. The surrender to feeling is the destination toward which all reasoning travels, whether or not we acknowledge the journey. This is not a complaint but an honest psychological observation about how human beings actually work. Quote application. This is one of the most practically important observations in the collection for understanding how to replace hate with wisdom. Hatred is a feeling, and rational arguments alone rarely dissolve it, because the reasoning of the hateful person is in service of their feelings, not independent of them. The mission must engage the emotional dimension directly, through story, through genuine human connection, through the feelings of recognition and warmth that wisdom generates, because that is where reasoning ultimately arrives. Blaise Pascal was born in 1623 in Clermont-Ferrand, France, and was a mathematical and scientific prodigy who invented one of the first mechanical calculators at 19, made foundational contributions to probability theory and fluid mechanics, and then underwent a profound religious conversion in 1654 that redirected his formidable intellect toward theology and moral philosophy. His Pensées, fragments of an unfinished apologetic for Christianity, published posthumously, contain some of the most incisive observations on human psychology ever written, including his famous observation that the heart has reasons that reason does not know. His observation that all reasoning ends in surrender to feeling was not a dismissal of reason but an honest psychological diagnosis. He had watched himself and others construct elaborate rational justifications for positions that feeling had already staked out, and he had concluded that the honest account of human cognition had to include the role of emotion as the ultimate destination of rational inquiry. He applied this insight to religious belief, arguing that the felt experience of God was more fundamental than any argument for God's existence, but the observation is universal. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Engage the emotional dimension of any significant belief or behavior rather than relying on rational argument alone. The feeling that reasoning serves must be addressed directly. 2. Apply this insight to the work of replacing hate. Arguments for human dignity must be felt as well as understood, which requires story, human connection, and genuine warmth alongside factual accuracy. 3. Use Pascal's observation honestly in self-examination. What feelings are your most confident reasonings actually serving, and are those feelings worth the reasoning you are building to protect them?
Quote 21.7. Adversity is the first path to truth. Lord Byron, 1788 to 1824. Quote definition. The most direct and reliable path to genuine understanding of oneself, of others, of what actually matters, runs through adversity rather than around it. Comfort produces the pleasant illusion of understanding. Hardship produces the real thing, because adversity strips away the assumptions, pretensions, and comfortable beliefs that easier circumstances allow us to maintain unchallenged. Quote application. The people most capable of understanding hatred from the inside, and therefore most capable of replacing it with something better, are often those who have experienced the adversity that exposes its roots. And the mission itself, facing the genuine difficulty of trying to change deeply held beliefs and cultural habits, is walking the first path to the truths that matter most about human nature and human potential. Adversity is not the obstacle, it is the curriculum. George Gordon Byron, Lord Byron, was born in 1788 in London to an aristocratic family of chaotic finances and turbulent relationships. His father abandoned the family when Byron was 3. He inherited his title and the ancestral Newstead Abbey at 10. He was born with a club foot that caused him social pain throughout his life, and which he addressed with the combination of athletic bravado and poetic sensitivity that characterized his entire public persona. He became the most celebrated poet in Europe in his mid-20s. Childe Harold's Pilgrimage and Don Juan made him a literary sensation, and spent his adult life in a series of passionate relationships, political commitments, and self-imposed exiles that took him from London to Venice to Greece, where he died of fever at 36 while helping organize the Greek War of Independence. His observation about adversity and truth was drawn from a life that had no shortage of the former and used it to produce extraordinary quantities of the latter. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Reframe adversity as the educational experience it actually is rather than the obstacle it feels like. The truths it produces are not available through easier means. 2. Mind the difficult experiences of life, failure, loss, resistance, suffering, for the genuine understanding they contain rather than simply enduring them until they pass. 3. Apply Byron's principle to the work of social change. The adversity that the mission encounters in trying to replace hate is the first path to the truths about human resistance, human potential, and human transformation that easier work could never reveal.
Quote 21.8. Nobody minds having what is too good for them. Jane Austen, 1775 to 1817. Quote definition. Human beings universally welcome receiving better than they might strictly deserve. No one objects to unexpected generosity, unearned kindness, or gifts that exceed what they could reasonably claim. The observation is delivered with Austen's characteristic wit, but its implication is warm and practically important. The fear of being too generous, too kind, or too good to others is a fear with no genuine basis in how people actually receive such treatment. Quote application. For the mission of spreading wisdom and replacing hate, this is one of the most liberating principles in the collection. The fear that wisdom education might be wasted on undeserving audiences, that kindness extended to the unkind might be excessive, that generosity toward hostile communities might be unwarranted. All of these fears dissolve in the light of Austen's observation. Nobody minds receiving what is too good for them. Give the best you have, and give it freely. Jane Austen was born in 1775 in Steventon, Hampshire, England, the seventh of 8 children of a country clergyman who encouraged his children's reading and writing from an early age. She wrote her 6 major novels, Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma, Northanger Abbey, and Persuasion. While living in modest domestic circumstances, managing household duties alongside her writing, and publishing anonymously as a lady throughout her lifetime. She died in 1817 at 41, never having married, never having achieved the financial independence her novels made possible for their readers to imagine, and never having seen the full scale of the reputation that would make her one of the most beloved novelists in the English language. Her wit, precise, warm, and utterly without cruelty, is the most consistent feature of her work, and this observation is characteristic. It delivers genuine wisdom about human generosity and human receptiveness in the form of a perfectly calibrated comic observation that you keep thinking about long after the laugh has faded. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Release the hesitation to offer the best, the most generous interpretation, the most genuine kindness, the most complete wisdom, on the grounds that the recipient may not deserve it. 2. Recognize that the universal human willingness to receive what is too good for us is an invitation to give freely rather than a reason for calculation. 3. Apply this principle to the mission. Offer wisdom, kindness, and genuine human connection at full generosity, because nobody minds receiving what is too good for them. And the fear of overgiving is almost never justified by the reality of how such gifts are received.
How they work together as a unified philosophy. The Start Virtuously framework. Initiation layer. Self-starting and protecting integrity. Quotes 1-2. Breedlove. Establish self-initiation as the act that makes everything else possible. The start you give yourself because no one else is going to provide it. Gracián. Protect that start with unconditional integrity. A single lie destroys the whole reputation that virtuous action has built, making honesty the foundation that makes the start worth sustaining. Together, the launch and the protection of virtuous beginning. Breedlove provides the ignition, give yourself the start, while Gracián provides the foundation that makes it durable, protect the integrity that gives the start its value. A self-started enterprise built on dishonesty collapses, one built on genuine integrity compounds. Character layer, kindness as greatness and justice as extension. Quotes 3-4. Hubbard. Define genuine greatness by its most honest measure. Men are only as great as they are kind, making kindness the standard rather than the supplement of real achievement. Dickens. Extend that kindness outward into justice, from the home where charity begins to the neighbor where justice begins next, completing the moral arc from personal virtue to social responsibility. Together, the full arc of virtuous character in action. Hubbard establishes kindness as the measure of greatness, and Dickens extends that kindness outward from the personal to the social. Kindness without extension stays home. Extension without kindness becomes mere obligation. Together they describe the complete virtue, genuinely kind, actively just, expanding outward. Foundation layer, liberty requiring virtue and reason serving feeling. Quotes 5-6. Rush. Establish virtue as the prerequisite of genuine freedom. Liberty without virtue is no blessing, grounding the entire virtuous enterprise in the understanding that freedom and character are not competing but inseparable. Pascal. Provide the honest psychological insight that all reasoning ultimately serves feeling.
making the emotional engagement with virtue as important as the rational argument for it. Together, the philosophical and psychological foundations of virtuous living. Rush ensures that virtue is understood as freedom's prerequisite rather than its constraint. Pascal ensures that the path to virtue runs through the heart as well as the head, because reasoning about kindness must ultimately be felt as kindness to produce genuine change. Liberty through virtue, virtue through felt understanding. Growth layer, adversity as truth's path and generosity as liberation. Quote 7-8. Byron, name adversity as the first path to truth, the genuine understanding of self, others, and what matters that only difficulty can produce. Austin, close the framework with the most liberating permission available. Nobody minds having what is too good for them, freeing the virtuous person from the hesitation to give their best. Together, the education and the liberation of the virtuously living person. Byron's adversity provides the curriculum that comfortable living cannot, the truths that only difficulty reveals. Austin's generous observation provides the permission to give freely once those truths have been learned, because the fear of being too generous is almost never justified by how generosity is actually received. Learn through adversity, give without reservation.
Free Easy Extra Advantage Math, Spelling and Reading Workbooks you can download for free at stop2think.com or buy at educationstopshate.com. Free Easy Math Wisdom Workbooks with octo repetition to grow math self-confidence. You'll get plenty of repetitive practice of age ranges and averages of our 52 teams of 8 quote authors. Free Easy Alpha Cipher-coded puzzles teach letters, numbers, and phrases using antique wisdoms that encourage and educate. Can you decode this cipher quote of encouragement using either our Learning to Spell or just for fun instructions? And since time is money, practice reading faster with 52 teams of antique rival wisdoms that have passed the test of time to encourage, educate, and entertain generations for centuries. We offer printed versions and timed videos with background music. Sign up for free weekly emails of 52 teams of antique rival wisdom workbooks with easy math, spelling, and reading practice. And, if you'd like to get paid for sharing our wearable wisdoms, keep this in mind. Everyone I know wears a shirt, and most of us change them daily, so change your shirt and change the world. Social equalities are blatantly subliminal antique positive wisdoms repetitively shared without saying a word. This applies to all our wearable shareable wisdoms. Like pretty witty baby onesies and baby tees that you and others will see and read multiple times a day. The same is true with pretty witty kids, but they'll also share these wisdoms with anyone that can read at daycare or school. Youthful truths let your kids gain confidence sharing antique wisdoms with their friends. Imagine them sharing words of wisdom with classmates and teachers. Therefore I think tees I wear is a super easy way to share words of wisdom that have passed the test of time. Our social equalities help make us all wiser and kinder with blatantly subliminal messages promoting a more fair and equal opportunity society for all. And don't forget our giftwisdoms.com for birthdays and holidays that makes it easy to share the wisdom with clothing, coffee mugs, and magnets. So do the future a favor by encouraging, educating, and entertaining with words of wisdom that have passed the test of time to make us all wiser and kinder. With wearable wisdoms to fit babies, kids, and adults. You can clothe a whole family, city, or state. Join the 52 of 8 today.